Meetings. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, tonight, so one down, they won't be with us, but otherwise we've got a full house. Start with the approval of the minutes. We've got two sets to approve. We'll start with the minutes of 3/19/24. May I have a motion for their approval?
So moved. Second.
Are there any additions, subtractions, amendments people would like to make? Hearing none, take a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? They pass. Second group of minutes, April 4th. Motion to approve.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any changes, amendments? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, thank you very much.
I was not at that meeting.
Your presence was.
No, I'm just saying that it says absent. I was absent.
I understand. I
You were?
understand.
Oh, okay.
We just feel like you're here all the time. So
I
that's-
am in spirit. I was partial here.
We do have a hand up for public comment. We will open it up to allowed to talk. Terrence, you should be allowed to talk at this point.
I think I'm unmuted, so thank you very much. Just
Ross.
quickly, I'm sorry, thank you.
Yeah.
Just quickly, my name's Terrence McGrath. I just have a couple of comments regarding, I'll say items 10 through 14, although I'm not going to specifically speak about any of them. I understand their applications with ARPA. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been involved in a number of meetings with this. It's just basically a comment to advise the Board of Finance, if they don't already are aware, that I was the submittee of an application representing 16 or so homeowners on two streets in Old Saybrook, on Beachview and Driftwood Drive, formerly known as Soundview Avenue, in the Chalker Beach section. I submitted the application yesterday. It's regarding water utility. I had spoken before, so just a couple of comments, a couple of observations. First and foremost, I guess, in looking at the ARPA application, I'll look at the categories that the terminology, the ARPA final rule categories. Three of them are somewhat COVID related, although they get into more government services. And the fourth one, to make necessary capital improvements in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. And just, again, purely an observation, just looking at over the last 3 years, the applications and the projects funded. From what I can tell, there's about $57,000 that was invested in water utility, which represents about 3% of the current funding expended, and overall will represent less than 2% of the total, roughly $3 million. So again, just an observation for that, only because it's identified as one of the ARPA final rules. So again, this is a need that I don't think is unfamiliar to the town. It's been discussed for a number of years. The water situation on those streets has gotten progressively worse with the inundation of public, town and state stormwater that dumps into the Chalker, what's known as the Chalker Beach Marsh. That is not a tidal marsh. That's an enclosed marsh. So it's not something that easily flows out into the Long Island Sound. And now the water could sit there for 7 to 10 days, which causes havoc on those two streets, that homes are literally within 100 or so feet of that particular marsh. So I understand where the ARPA committee is. I do raise the issue tonight, as I know the funding, what's remaining of it, I guess 1.2 million back at the end of February. I believe it was 5 in total, and the 5 that will be spoken about tonight. Applications were put in to kind of clear the money. We still did push as quick as we could over the last 6 weeks to put a application in. Dealing with the water company isn't all the easiest, but we went through and did it and submitted it with it yesterday. And again, just my last observation, over the last 3 years, or in about 3 years of the fund, it's taken about 3 years to spend 1.7 million, but in less than 2 months now, considering the end of February is when it was presented, the remaining 1.2 million is up for funding. I do understand it is coming towards the end of where the funding is. So again, that's just my comment to advise the Board of Finance that there is an application that has been submitted. It just was submitted yesterday. Hopefully we have the opportunity to present to the ARPA committee. Again, this is more of just a notification to the Board of Finance. Thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any other, Doug?
Good evening, Douglas McCracken. I'm a member of the Planning Commission, and I work with Chris on sea level rise issues. There's an item that potentially will be added to the agenda tonight. I'm hoping it gets added, where Chris will be looking for additional match funding for a grant. She will explain the details of the grant, but I wanted to let you know I fully support this project. It's an important project for the town. I appreciate the board's consideration for the match. Should it be approved, it will prevent us from having to break this grant that we've been working on apart and submit it as separate grants, which would just extend the overall project out the timeline. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Doug. Any other comments? Okay, we will move along then. Next is the treasurer's report. Madam Treasurer?
Okey dokey. Okay, so we will go to our executive summary of the treasurer's report. So your executive summary as of March 31, 2024. Fiscal year to date, the town has received revenue of $51,210,001, or 101.9% of the total amount of $50,276,744 budgeted for fiscal year 24. When comparing our performance to last fiscal year, we are 1.6% behind this time last year. Next, we move to the authorized investment section. As of the end of March, the town had $40.2 million in its bank accounts. In the last month, the STIP rate varied just slightly at 5.56%, and today it is at 5.43%. And Webster, as you know, gives us the STIP rate in arrears, and last month it was 5.43%. On March 15th, we had a bond come due, and the investment committee reinvested that bond for fiscal year 25, $2.1 million for a 10.5-month bond at a 5.14% interest rate, which will earn an interest income of $94,364 of interest income for fiscal year 25, which will hold its maturity till January 31 of 2025. Any questions on that? The next town cash bond will mature on May 15th for $2.1 million, and the ARPA bond matures on May 31st for $1.282 million.
And Mr. Chair, I just want to make a quick comment on revenues. The percent received 23 versus 24 is simply a point of reference. It's not, you're right, it's behind, but it's not really behind. I mean,
Right.
We've collected, as you can see, over 100% of local revenues, state of Connecticut revenues and taxes. So,
Well, I was gonna make the point that 23, we got the 600,000.
Right, we have that, yeah,
Right, and
that
so,
too.
so that's,
Anything north, I would say of 100%
Yeah.
is very good. Let's just leave it at that.
Thank you, residents.
So the numbers are strong and, yeah, anyway, and we expect additional revenues to trickle in, of course.
Absolutely.
we continue.
Anything else? Okay, I will continue. Okay, so that's that. Then we move to the pension. Okay, at the end of March, we received a report from Morgan Stanley, our investment manager. The town pension plan is up 9.49% fiscal year to date versus its benchmark of 11.29%. Over the 3-year horizon, the town plan has returned 2.11% versus its benchmark of 4.03%. The fire department pension plan is up 9.26% fiscal year to date and has returned 2.36% over the 3-year horizon versus its benchmark of 4.03%. The pension board met with the actuary in March, and the funded ratios have been changed. As you see that bottom figure in your chart there wasn't much movement because there were no major assumption changes, and the actuarial variables came in as expected. The town funded ratio increased slightly from 85 to 85.2%. The fire department plan's funded ratio increased from 52.7 to 55.1%. The increase was expected as this plan takes in, the fire department, more contributions than it pays out. We should expect to see funding increases yearly in the fire department plan, all else being equal, no major changes to the assumptions. Carl?
And no major changes recommended by the actuary. So in terms of the discount rate, 6.75, 6.5. Becky Seelman from Millman was very comfortable with those not being changed. We've made a lot of progress on that over the last 12 years. I think, I want to say we were up towards 8% when I took office, maybe even 8.25. It was high, the assumption of the return. And we've whittled it down to 6.75 on the town plan, 6.5 on the fire department plan. And just so you, and again, I'll repeat on the fire department plan, even though it says 55% funded, we are making, it's a younger plan, and we are making the full contribution, and we have for a very long time. So we're doing everything right with that plan. And when the plan continues to get older, if we stay on this, it will be 100% funded at some point. But we are following the actuary's advice, both on our pension contributions to both the town pension plan and the fire department pension plan, as well as their recommendations in regard to the discount rate that we assume for return. So
And
it was a good report.
it is a good report, yeah. And the funded ratio is also, it's backward looking because it reflects the actuarial, it's a hard word to say, report as of June 30, 2023. And it's a reflection of how much money we have already put in, along with employees and earnings on our investments, as well as the assumption results. So, that's that. Any questions on that? Okay,
Oh, George,
it's hand up.
Yes, hi, I was just a question on the pension portion, more general comment. At one point you were saying that maybe we could have the pension board come in and have a meeting with them and discuss detail. That would be,
I've got it written down as something to be discussed.
that'd be great. Thank you very much.
Okay. So overall, the treasurer's responsibility is to oversee all monies belonging to the town. So as of March 31, we had total cash balances of $40.2 million. Total pension balances were $29.4 million for total assets under management of $69.6 million. So page 2 of your treasurer's report show our revenues broken out in more detail. Tax revenues were $426,469 for the month, bringing the fiscal year-to-date total to $48,629,553, or 100% 0.9 for the amount budgeted for fiscal year '24. Then in the middle section, where you see state revenue, you will see there is a new line item in the middle section where it says special ed, state of Connecticut with a little asterisk. Do you guys have it highlighted in green also? Okay, so these funds are booked in the general fund, but it is the Board of Ed money, and we include them as part of our budget. Any questions on that? Even though it's Board of Ed money and they spend it,
So it's, when you say our money.
not our
The
money.
overall pool, the overall town pool of funds, this is part of it, and so we're now showing it, is what you're
We
saying?
show it, but it's deducted out of our general fund money.
May I comment, Barbara? May I help you out here? Okay. So the town has received special ed funds. We receive them every single year. Historically, in the Board of Finance reporting, we back them out. And the reason why we back them out is because the Board of Ed will include the special ed funds as part of their surplus. Even though that's the case, they come into the town and they are booked as part of our general fund revenues. So for this month's report, in order to avoid mistakes, because I back them out every single month before putting them in the report, I decided that we should probably show it. It gives you all an indication of how much is going to come in. You can see in past years, they only received 105,000. This year, they received 150,000. They don't necessarily know, the Board of Ed, how much they're going to get every year. And again, that's going to be one of the components of their ultimate surplus at the end of the fiscal year. So unless anyone has any objections, we would like to report it this way so that you can see what is happening. At the bottom of the report, you can see the total revenues that we have received as a general fund that are booked and will be reported on from an audit perspective. And then we back that out to see how much of those funds are attributable to the town. That's it.
Is the tax relief from OPM for veterans and disabled, is that a new line?
Sorry, what?
Where do you see that?
Right.
Yes,
two
we have
lines?
received 11,000. We've received 11,700 year to date. That is received by the town. It's a general fund revenue.
Okay, but I'm just saying, I don't think we've seen that line before either.
Is that a new
We
line?
have. Yes, we have
Oh.
seen that one before. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
All right.
And the local revenue?
Okay, so let's carry on. I just have a few more things. So in terms of local revenues, the town collected $585,445 in local revenues, or 101.9% of our fiscal year '24 budget. We collected $120,378 of interest income for the past 2 months. And we have exceeded our budget by $345,667, or 57% so far this fiscal year on interest income. As of March 31st, we have $933,257 of surplus collected. And that's all I have to say.
Are there any questions for the treasurer?
Where do we see the checks come in from Fine Federal? Which account are those going into?
I don't see that on my report yet.
Leanne, find federal income. Did I explain how that
No.
worked?
Yeah, they pay us directly, right?
Yes.
It's not
We
from
bill
the
them.
state.
No, we're
Right.
gonna bill them, I
Okay.
heard,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So
We-
we receive a report from the Department of Revenue Services that tells us what percentage, I think it's 3% that we get of their revenues, and they tell us exactly what it is. We then bill Fine Federal directly, and then they send us a check. So far, we have received one check for $6,000 and we just billed them last month for $9,000. So we had a 50% increase in 1 month. So to date, $15,000 in 2 months received.
So the money.
Yeah, where will we see that?
So the money, because it is, to be designated for
Right.
specific purposes, is being held in an off-budget account. It can't be a general revenue.
Got it.
Oh, okay, so I'm not gonna see it on my
No.
report at all?
No.
Oh.
So,
Oh.
Okay, any other questions? Good question.
Just,
Go ahead, Paul.
so it's on an off-budget account. It's for specific purposes.
yes.
How do we spend it? Who
Yeah.
appropriates it?
I think we would go through the normal appropriations
normal
process. Yeah. There's like 6 different purposes. Most of them deal, like 4 out of the 6 deal with prevention. One of them actually says infrastructure or I forget the
Community improvement.
Beautification.
improvements in the area in which the store is located. And I think that went in there because they probably figured people were sticking them in maybe not the best areas. And therefore you can make infrastructure improvements with that money. But I think we would go through the normal appropriation process with that. I don't know that there's anything to the contrary that was indicated in the law that when it was passed that, you know, it could be the chief elected official can make the call. So I wouldn't do it any different.
Okay.
Now, we're also getting regular, I mean, Leanne, I don't know, the opioid money, all these opioid settlements. We keep getting money on that, which Heather is starting to come up with some planning projects. This is from, I think, McKinsey, from CVS, from, obviously from the Sacklers, you know, so I forget how much we've taken in, but I'm gonna say it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 30,000 from opioid settlements that our Attorney General through class action lawsuits has accumulated, so.
Okay, other questions? Thank you, Madam Treasurer.
Thank you.
Leanne, Finance Director's report.
Okay, good evening, everyone. So I will start with our projected surplus for the end of the fiscal year. As the treasurer just mentioned, at this point, we already have $1 million over the revenue budget. And through my calculations, I figure we might, if the same thing that happened last year happens again this year, we could take in another $100,000 from building fees, town clerk, interest income, and park and rec fees. So we still have that to look forward to for the balance the next 3 months of the fiscal year. So I expect about a $2 million surplus. Again, another very healthy year. In terms of the finance director's reports, there haven't been any appropriations since the last meeting, although I know that we had that special meeting earlier in the month, and I did not include that because that's part of April's report. That will be included in our next update that I give in May. In terms of the cash flow summary, which is on page 2 of the finance director's report, for the month, the town was down $2.8 million. And the majority of that, as usual, comes from activities in the general fund, which was down $2.9 million. We received $600,000 worth of revenues and had $3.5 million worth of expenses. In the capital funds, you can see that one's up $364,000. We did receive a grant from the state of Connecticut for $500,000 for the Main Street Connection Program. Some money was also spent against that for some of the harbor management infrastructure programs that you all know about. And in terms of the reserve funds, that's up $16,000 for the month. I just like to bring this up every now and then that those reserve funds are in a special bank account, and we have added year to date $132,000 worth of interest. So, nearly half of what we typically add to our capital non-recurring funds on a appropriation basis is coming in through interest income. And then finally, non-major funds, down 255,000. Again, the usual suspects, the pension funds, and we paid their payroll, 170,000 in youth and family services. So that explains cash flow. Capital outlays, there was not any major activities during the month of March. And the last page of the report shows all of the operating budgets. All of the budget and all the line items are coming in as expected. There haven't been any other budgets except for the ones that I've mentioned in prior meetings that are going over 100%. So again, everything looks good. And that's the end of my report.
Questions for the finance director?
The surplus you're projecting, Leanne, comes to about 4% of the budget. On a tax basis to the taxpayer, is that a situation where we could be addressing an overtax situation? Since the surplus is 4% of the budget?
Well, we have to think about our assumptions that we use. In terms of the taxes collected, we assume we're only going to collect 99%. And typically we have in past years, as well as in this current year, we have collected greater than 99%, but that's a very conservative number. In fact, I think it's fairly high, if not the highest one that is used throughout the state of Connecticut. So, and we've talked at great lengths about the interest income, which is another contributor to the surplus. And we debated that, we don't want to have budget fluctuations year over year. So we did use a number that was $600,000 and we have already met that, and it continues to come in higher. So those two variables are the main contributors to our surplus. And I think that we've talked about that as we enter the budget year and during all of the deliberations.
So, when we had interest income when interest rates were low, we were making, anywhere from $30,000 to $80,000 in interest income. And we were assuming for a while there, $150,000. We lowered it during that lower interest period as a revenue. We were like, we're not making $150,000 on our town money. We took it up to $600,000 to say, hey, the taxpayers should get a benefit of this. We could take it up to 1.2 million. You're right, we could. But if there's a cut in interest rates, now we're chasing it. And that is a decision that I've made to put forward to the Board of Finance to be somewhat conservative in how much money we assume in interest income. I think if interest rates go to 3%, we would still make $600,000. But if they stay at 5% higher for longer, we're going to continue to outperform on the interest income. When the year we raised it to 600,000, I'm like, I did it with some trepidation. John, as you know, for years and years, we had 150,000 in the budget with Bob Fish going back. Now it's like, our rainy day fund is larger than it was, and therefore we're making more money on our money because we were building it over the years, and interest rates have come up. The building official, we're assuming, I played with that number for years and years, 180, 190, 200. I think one year might have been 220. But historically, or more recently, he's been bringing in 300 to 400,000. And he says to me, I just can't believe what's going on out there right now. There'll come a day when it's not going on. I assume we have actually raised that. I think we bumped it this year by 10 or 20,000, said, let's take it up. He seems to be bringing it in. So it's a question of, it's mostly, well, it's almost not exclusively, but 80% on the revenue side that we're seeing the surplus. So the question is, as a Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen. Do we want to assume revenues up here and then the year that it starts coming down, now we're chasing it and that goes in the mill rate? Or we can wait for it to come back and hopefully we're in more of a normal cycle. That, I agree, I hear what you're saying. I did that calculation in my head just before you said it. I'm like, it's about 4% of the budget and it's a lot. Now, don't forget, we have to put aside of that, let's say it's a 2 million surplus, about 400,000 has to be put aside to maintain a 17% rainy day fund. So off the top, the first 400 will go towards that. That's a good thing, right? So the rest of it will look towards projects probably. Leanne?
Yes, and the only other thing that I would add is, I hate to keep talking about COVID, but coming off of COVID is unusual times, and we are allowing ourselves to regulate. We have all this money in there from ARPA. We have all this money that's come in from these other grants and things like that are coming our way because of trying to get the economy in the right direction. And that's just advancing our balances. Also, the real estate market is also, I think, some of a tailwind from the COVID experience too, which is where we're getting our fees from town clerks in the building. So we do recognize these trends, and we are trying to slowly work our way into them and keep them moderated as we move forward in our budget process. So that's the only other thing I would add.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions? George?
I mean, just to follow up on your comment, Carl, and I think when we get to the ARPA conversation, I think I'd like to bring this point again, and also just in terms of just the general, the budget process that we're going through. But I think to your point, John, even though it looks like with the projection that we'll eventually get 2 million, we're not at 2 million yet. Right now, we're about 1 million so far. So eventually we may get to 2 million. Just in terms of taxes, we're almost spot on, right? The taxes budget was 48.17 million, and we're collecting 48.6. That's almost spot on. The difference really is, like I think what you were saying, the local revenues and what the state's giving us. And that's really, it's not, you can't gauge that, right? So it's not like we're actually taking more money from taxpayers that we should give back.
But George, I'm looking at it as a taxpayer. It doesn't get all the detail that we get. And they look at that surplus and they hear about the surplus. Thought process is a lot different.
Yeah.
That's where I'm coming from.
I understood, yeah, but, yeah.
Do you have other?
No, I'd like to come back to this point again, we actually talk about Europe.
Okay. Anybody else for the finance director? Leanne, thank you very much. Appreciate it. So, Mr. First Selectman, do you want to go forward with the Even Hill Road and then I'll work to amend our agenda, or should we jump right into amending the agenda to discuss the Long Island Sound Futures?
I would just like to, it's actually not an action item, so if I may just address this.
Okay.
So Ingham Hill Road, Farmer Brown lived on Ingham Hill Road, it was about 12 acres, a little over 12 acres. The town has a interestingly worded, of course, it has to be interestingly worded, right? Right of first refusal, that basically says, should the estate or should David Brown, while alive, choose to sell, or the estate choose to divest itself of the land, the town shall be given an option to purchase. And so what I've done a title search on the property because I think we stand in a position where we can acquire this piece of land. There's a couple mortgages on there. I sent the title search to the seller's attorney or to the estate attorney. I received a response from the attorney saying the estate has not decided what it intends to do with the property. I'm like, okay. In the meantime, I feel we as a town should do everything we can to put ourselves in position to acquire this piece of property. It is a key piece of property, in my opinion, for the town. To the south, you have Lake Rockview. To the west, you have other parcels of land that go straight to Clark Community Park. There's parking on this land. It is, in my opinion, just a piece of land that the town should acquire. And if we acquire it, it would be as open space, which is under the auspices of the Park and Rec Department. And then any projects or policy initiatives can be suggested, but would come from Park and Rec. So the funding, there's an off-budget account for land acquisition, which has $200,000 plus in it. That has been there since the day I've been first elected. It's never been used. And I assume those funds were put in there through the budgetary process. It was before me, so I can't tell you. Whether it was Mike Pace, whether it was Barbara Townsley, maybe even you may have some historical knowledge on that. But some monies were put aside. I can only assume those monies came in as a revenue or were appropriated from a budget into that and went into that fund. Regardless, whether it's by motion or by consensus, I will be asking this board to consider $93,555 to come out of that fund to purchase this piece of land. Really, all that remains is it's been gone through the planning commission, which is a necessary step to consider whether acquiring a piece of land is consistent with the town's plan of conservation and development. That went before planning several weeks ago. They unanimously approved it. Mr. McCracken's on the planning commission. So really all that would remain is for the estate to say, we are divesting ourselves of this property and offering it to the town, and then the town being ready to move forward with the purchase. Ready means Board of Selectmen would immediately call up a meeting and set a town meeting to acquire it. Really, once the funding is in place, and I think the funding is in place, all that really is needed, just like when you sell property, you go to the planning commission and you go to a town meeting. Those are the two things that are required for the acquisition or the sale of land. Here, of course, we need to purchase it, so there is a funding mechanism that the townspeople will have an opportunity to say yay or nay on. So I just want to update the board as to where we are with this property. I don't know that I'm asking for anything tonight other than to put it before this Board of Finance. Should there come a time when I hear from the estate, which I hope would be in the next month, 2 months, 3 months, I'll come back to the board and we can talk about it how these funds will be dispersed. It may be rapid fire because what the right of first refusal says is the town has 6 months once notified. But obviously we want to move relatively quickly. The good news is the money's there, the planning commission has approved it, so there's very few steps. And I have a title search that I've already sent to them. So whatever mortgages need to be paid off, and there were 2, and I don't know the status of them, whether they're still active or whether they've been paid off. That's all done. So we're in a good position. It's a great piece of land that I think, and the Board of Selectmen thinks, should come to the town.
Why wouldn't we approve that now?
Well, I mean, we can have that discussion. It's not what I've asked. Typically you don't on the first time you hear it.
I'm not saying to vote on it tonight, but why wouldn't we move it forward so that you're ready to go?
I think we are ready to go.
Yeah, well, why not get this part exercise?
So let me ask you this. So the money is there. It sits in an off-budget account. Off-budget accounts don't come to being typically without being funded. And when things are funded, I'm assuming, it wasn't me, that they've gone through the Board of Finance, town meeting, or budget referendum process. The money's there. So that's why I've said to the chairman, actually, query whether this board needs to take action even.
Wouldn't hurt to do it.
We are dispersing, and sometimes we do come to the board for dispersal.
I guess kind of going to Brad's point, unless there is any objection by the board, and you have talked about this in the past, it would seem to me that if we took a vote to approve the 93,555 coming out of this particular fund, you've got that in your back pocket and you just don't have to come to us. And then we go from there. And the 93,555 is a number that is already, kind of in stone somewhere, so that's not going to change, right?
Yeah, fine.
So, you have to make a motion, sir?
But is it on the, oh, it is on the agenda. It is, yes.
So we.
So I make a motion to approve, I gotta find the money, $93,555 for the purchase of 155 Ingham Hill Road. In the direction of the selectmen's office.
Coming out of the land acquisition.
Right.
I'll second that. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right,
Opposed? Good.
great,
very much.
thank you, appreciate it, and I'll keep you informed.
So, we have a little hiccup in our process. Many of you remember that we had a special meeting on April 4th. We approved, funding both from the, capital non-recurring as well as, the ARPA funds in order to serve as the match for the Long Island Sound, future funds grant application. Mr. McCracken noted in his public comment, there is some change. We've been notified that in fact, the ARPA money cannot be considered match. It's federal funds against federal funds, and that is not allowed. And so the question is back in front of the Board of Finance as to whether or not we would be willing to move forward with an additional 87,500 coming from capital non-recurring. It is not on the agenda tonight. We would need to amend the agenda to even have the discussion. If people are willing to do so, I will make a motion to amend the agenda in order to discuss this item.
I second.
There's a second. Any discussion on that? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so we now have an amended agenda. We have the agenda item that was part of your package. We have discussed it in the past. Chris, is there anything additional that you would like to raise for us?
So this came to me as a little bit of a shock on Friday. So first of all, I want to thank the Board of Finance and the ARPA committee for having a special meeting and all your help and funding the match. We are in a bit of a timeline, as you know, from your special meeting for May 1st. In 2022, we partnered with Westbrook and Fenwick in Clinton for Long Island Sound Future Funds match as well. There was 25,000 of ARPA funds, which is another issue. We'll keep that separate. And there was no indication that there was an issue with using the ARPA funds. Last year, we applied, we did not get a grant. That number, I believe, was $88,000. There was no issue with the ARPA funds. So when I came to you this year with the 87,500 of ARPA and 87,000 from this board, I didn't expect an issue. And Friday, as we really dug into this, it came to my attention from someone who was denied by it's the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, that this was going to be an issue. So I was on a conference call with Fussin O'Neill, our grant writer, trying to figure out how we were going to redesign the scope of the grant. And this came to my attention, so we scrambled, and Monday it was confirmed that we cannot allocate ARPA funds towards the match. On another note, we got a grant yesterday for $6,375 for a grant writer, but right now we're stuck.
So, the ask is, to appropriate an additional, so at town meeting, before this meeting, we approved $87,500 from the capital non-recurring fund towards this grant that Chris is talking about. Because, we can't use ARPA dollars, we are now asking, or it's been added to the agenda, to consider an additional $87,500 from the capital non-recurring account, so that we can fully fund the match portion of this grant, to apply for this grant. We've talked over the years, certainly over the last few months, that we want to start looking at some resilience projects. Chris has been looking at them for many years. This isn't the first time we're discussing it, but it is the first time we're maybe talking about this kind of money. It's probably, in the grand scheme of things, not a huge amount of money. It's a significant amount of money. I'm not saying it's not. But I would support Chris's efforts towards, it's basically a total of $175,000 that the town would have to come up with. We've already come up with half of that, so that we can apply for this grant. And if we are unsuccessful in getting the grant, we probably ask this board to allocate that money to an off-budget account for future grant writing or projects that Chris is finding, because there's a lot of opportunity out there right now, more than there was maybe 5 years ago, to try to get grant funding for resiliency projects. And this is all about planning, because if you don't have the plan, you're never going to get the construction dollars. So that's essentially the ask, correct?
I got a question. Is Clinton and Westbrook on board with this?
So that's a separate
Yeah.
grant, that's another issue. So in 2022, we applied for a grant and received ARPA funding for $25,000.
Right.
That's supposed to wrap up by July. We're already having the draft sections. So that $25,000 was our part of the match. The project budget on that one was $230,250 at the time. The match was $57,000. Our portion, which we also sponsored Fenwick with, who pays taxes to us, was $25,000. The rest will be made up through Westbrook and Clinton, I believe. I'm not sure what their part of the match is. At the time that we applied, Clinton did not have a town planner and didn't get the support.
I think,
But we're onto the new one, if that sounds
right, I think the point about, so Clinton is not part of this particular grant proposal. Westbrook could be, and if there's a map on the back of the sheet that was part of our package, and I think Chris, it's important to kind of note the kind of small part of Westbrook that's involved, as stated again.
So when we applied for the 2022 grant, which we're calling the Foreshore Resiliency Grant, Westbrook, bless you, and Peter Gillespie, their town planner, Westbrook was the applicant for all of this. Westbrook did all the heavy lifting, Westbrook did the grant writing, and that allowed us to update our coastal management plan. It allowed Westbrook and Clinton to have a coastal management plan and coastal resiliency plan, and a coastal resiliency plan for Fenwick, which for some reason Fenwick was excluded from our plan. Usually we partner with Fenwick. So that was a lot more to it. So this round, or let me go back, in 2022, we were asked to speak at a Zoom meeting with about 600 people online throughout the country about our project. So we were a little surprised that we got the project in the grant award. But one of the main reasons was our partnership with the other towns and our ability to go beyond our borders. So as many of you know, we've had a number of issues in the west end of town with streets flooding. The Chalker Beach Tide Gate is always a hot topic. Since I started here, it'll be 24 years in October. We've had constant discussions about the Tide Gate, how it's working. A gentleman before was talking about how it could impact his well. So we've really gotten nowhere because we don't have any data to help even think about getting to the point of permitting. So this proposal, and if you look at the map, it has the Cold Spring Brook and it has Chapman Beach. But it really is Indiantown, Saybrook Manor, Bel Air Manor, Summerwood condominiums, and Chalker Beach. So there's very little span in Westbrook, and Old Saybrook is the primary applicant, but we feel that from going from our previous proposal to coming back with at least having one of our partners with this second grant, that it shows we're still looking beyond our borders.
Okay, George.
So I need some clarification. I'm a little bit lost here. So if I heard you correctly, we're gonna fund half of the grant request. And if we don't get the grant, I thought I heard you say we're just gonna save the money.
Yeah, since I would propose that if we don't get the grant money, we just take this capital non-recurring funding and put it in a designated account towards resiliency efforts.
So I guess my question is, it feels like there is a large need in that area to fix. And we can't even get to square zero without doing some study. And that study is gonna take about $350,000. And what we're doing right now, well, I don't know how much the study's gonna cost, but we're applying for a grant for $350,000 to initiate the study.
Mhm.
If we don't get the grant money, why should that study be stopped or paused? We feel like that we should do that study regardless of whether, we feel like the grant money is just a help in addition, right? It's just.
We can cross that bridge, obviously.
So that is, so they're matching 50%. So since we met, we did get the grant writing assistance to put our grant writer into place. At that point, I thought the funding was secured, so I hit send on the application. And the other thing that we did was on April 10th, we submitted pretty much the same grant package to the National Fish and Wildlife folks, and that is for a National Coastal Resilience Fund, which is different than Long Island Sound. That application is a pre-application to see if we could even qualify, but the thought was, okay, we went and did this last year. We're here again, we kind of got to the top of the pile is what we think. So as a safety measure, why not see if we can pre-apply with what we have so far
To this other grant.
for the other grant. And I mean, we've also discussed, and Doug was at one of the meetings, we talked about different grants. So in this room, we had folks from the Planning Commission, DEP, Public Works, different engineering firms, our grant writer, our state flood manager, trying to figure out the best approach to this. So the thought was, well, maybe it's not Long Island Sound, even though we were encouraged to reapply. So the thought was, well, why not take what we have so far and see if we can pre-qualify? And it is another National Fish and Wildlife Fund grant, and there's so many acronyms now, but it's a National Coastal Resiliency Fund grant. So that's also in the works. And I mean, I'd like to kind of keep trying to get this through one way or the other. If we can get 50%, return with someone paying 50%, there's a lot of resiliency money out there.
When will you know if the money were to be appropriated? Do you know when they're?
November. So we should know in October. And that's why I think we need to kind of have the plan B. I like Carl's idea of kind of having that money somewhere that I don't have to keep coming back and say, well, we're applying for this again with a different grant. Obviously, we would inform you, but I think it's trying to take advantage of the resiliency money that's out there, the grant writing assistance money that's out there, and move forward. And to kind of give you just an idea, I know some of you were here for the last meeting. If we get the grant, we're looking at Cold Spring Brook Marsh, that's between Westbrook and Summerwood and Chalker Beach, the Chalker Beach Marsh, and the Hager Creek Marsh, which is the Mud Creek. And the anticipated result, depending on how we work on this, is an ecological assessment, data collection, modeling, mitigation strategy research, feasibility analysis, and some ideas for conceptual designs, and some permit information. So one of the struggles that we've had with trying to help our neighborhoods is that we don't have any of this data. So if anyone is going to apply, whether it's the town or a neighborhood, to fix a problem, they say, well, how is that going to impact the marsh? How is that going to change the dynamics of the area? So we're at ground zero right now. This will move it along. I think what Doug was alluding to is, yes, we can break it down, but it's just going to take longer. Our infrastructure and our roads are going to continue to be flooded and inundated with complaints. Our marshes are going to continue to die or flood out. So that's really where we're looking to go with this. And that's why I think it's important to go forward with the full project versus piecemealing it. So if we were to get the Long Island Sound Future Funds Award, just like we did last time, they give you 2 years. The project we're working on with the other towns, we gave them 12 months. And we interviewed consultants and they said, well, that's a little too short. And we're like, well, if you can't do it, we'll go to the next consultant. So we're committed to it because sea level continues to rise, our roads continue to flood.
Well, that area of town is problematic, and it has been, I mean, since I've been first selectman, I mean.
Well, the whole shoreline for the most part is problematic, but it's, trying to kind of build off of our partnership with Westbrook, and going through with another town to show we're still looking beyond the borders.
So let me bring this kind of to what I think we ought to plan for tonight is, if this board is willing, we ought to focus on the 87.5 matching the grant application that is going in as of May 1. So second part of the match to make that happen. Recognizing that there is a broader discussion about how are we going to be funding coastal resiliency, both studies and projects in the future. We just had the conversation a few minutes ago about surplus funds that the town will be allocating over the summer. I would suggest at that point, that might be a good time to have a conversation about an off-budget coastal resiliency account, which if we ultimately then don't get the Long Island Sound Futures Fund, we can then have that account in place and put this money into. But let's not get too complex with this money tonight. Let's just do the 87.5 for this purpose. Does that make sense? Okay, Chris, did you have a point?
So my other dilemma is the 25,000 from 2022.
Well, because we don't know one way or the other on that.
Oh, no, that's the plan that's going right now.
No, I understand, but you have not been notified that it's not eligible.
So we spoke with the National Fish and Wildlife Long Island Sound Future Funds that sponsored this grant, and they are not taking the 25,000 from the ARPA. They're not accepting any ARPA funding. So we have a clear no on the 25,000.
So you need 25 and 87?
Yes.
Did you say so?
Just,
Well, that's why I'm asking now, because they're gonna ask for the 25,000 for this grant.
just,
Because we were at the point with Westbrook that it was time to,
When we signed up for this grant or entered into an agreement with them, did they know where the money was coming from, or were they just oblivious? They just heard that there was money coming and didn't ask its funding source?
so in 2022, when Westbrook made the application, they said, would Old Saybrook and Fenwick be willing to come up with 25,000? And at the time, it was ARPA, we got the money, Old Saybrook said to Westbrook, we have the funding. And then we kind of went on with this until Friday,
Well,
where
what I'm saying, that the people that,
Did the funders know it was?
yeah, the people that come, did they know it was coming from ARPA? And just blissfully went about their way, and then at the last minute tell us, oh, by the way, we don't take, we don't take Spanish doubloons or whatever the hell it is.
so I suspect for the 2022 application, Old Saybrook had to just provide a letter showing we had the match. They may not have known. We didn't get the money last year. I know another, one of our neighborhood associations applied and they were denied for ARPA, so they may not have known.
Okay, now,
Sorry.
no, I'm just trying to figure, because now we have appropriated $87,000 through ARPA, 25,000, and it's just sitting there. Do we have to take it back and put it back in the pot, or what do we have to do?
it would go back to the ARPA.
Does it automatically go back?
Yeah, well, it hasn't been, I mean. I
We
guess there's a
voted,
question.
this body voted to appropriate it or use it.
If we can't, hasn't been spent.
It hasn't been spent.
I'll tell you what, well, let us think about that.
Yeah,
But yes.
I don't want to lose what I'm trying,
Oh,
I don't
we
want to
won't
lose
lose it.
$100,000.
We won't lose it.
Okay.
We aren't gonna lose it.
So it would go back in the ARPA fund, wouldn't
Right,
Yes, it would.
right.
Oh,
we hope.
The question, Paul's asking the mechanism, how it gets back there.
it? Well, if it wasn't, the check wasn't written, it's still there.
It's still there, number one.
Yeah,
But it's there, it's designated for a specific thing.
it is, but that's an illegal appropriation, so maybe it's void from the.
Yeah, that's what
So
I don't
anyway,
know the
if
answer.
there's a motion, well, there's not. a
We
motion.
don't have a motion. yet.
Yeah, right.
So what is your, what's your timing on the 25? I'm just, the 25 is a surprise coming in tonight. So could we move forward on the 87.5? We'll be meeting again on May 7th. You may have some more information by that on the 25, and if we need to do a motion on the 25, we can do it then with that.
I think that'll be fine. Westbrook, did contact me about a week ago to ask for the 25 because they needed to pay our consultant. And Westbrook actually at this point is not aware of our problem. I've been trying to figure out and verify that it was a problem, therefore I'm here. So they will be sending us a bill or something asking for the 25,000. So I mean, I think we could,
Yeah. The check's in the mail.
Should be net 30 anyway, we got plenty of time. We're good.
Okay,
so
so,
I think it could wait till May, but
yeah.
we are gonna get
Understood.
an invoice of
So
some.
they ever gave you a pro forma of the report? Is that in your left hand there or? no?
So the end date for the project is supposed to wrap up in July. I'm just kind of showing this is a little section of the draft. So we're going, we're drafting section by section. So we still have hydrodynamic modeling, sea level rise and so forth. So I just brought my draft section that I received that I'm reviewing and Doug's reviewing right now, just to show you things are in movement for the 2022. And we're reviewing it, and then that will go out for public comment soon with the hope of keeping to our schedule to wrap 2022 for sure. Resiliency plan, which will be the 2024, wrap that up by July within our 1 year.
Okay, so with all of that in mind, I would like to make a motion And the motion is to approve $87,500 from the capital non-recurring fund, number 3350, for the purpose of providing a match for the 2024 Long Island Sound Futures Fund grant. And further, to move this motion to a town meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Dussault. Any other discussion?
Yeah, I'm a little confused. Do you need $175,000
Yes.
to make the
But
application?
87.5
So
is
why are
already.
we delaying? What are we benefiting by delaying an action that we will be taking?
We're not. So 87.5 has already been approved and went through town meeting earlier today.
Oh.
And so
okay.
this is the second 87.5 to get to the
So you're
175.
getting to 175. Okay, that wasn't clear in my mind.
Okay,
Does
this have
to go to that meeting?
Any other
Will
discussion?
this one have to go as well?
Yes. One more comment. Chris, and, you know, this is, I mean, I'll take a little bit of responsibility for this. She's taken the fall. Early on, I do recall, be careful with ARPA match, you know, and I do recall information back in 21 where they were saying, be careful. So, part or a significant part of this oops is on me, not on Chris. Chris is doing her job, trying to get resiliency funding, trying to get housing, diversity and housing in this town, in addition to doing all the other great stuff she does with zoning. So she's here to ask. Chris does a wonderful job. And I just don't want this board to have oh my God, you know, she made a mistake. She didn't make a mistake.
I wasn't implying.
No, I'm not looking at you by saying.
No, I was implying
I
that
want
the
that.
federal government saw
Yeah,
and then
Yeah.
didn't speak up until the last
but I
minute.
just want that on the record that, I mean, at the end of the day, I was the one studying all the ARPA stuff in the beginning, and so I'll take the blame for that.
Okay.
So, did we vote?
No.
All in favor,
Yeah.
please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay.
And Carl, following up on what you just said, I would love to have you get in touch with CCM, because I don't think all federal agencies are handling the ARPA money once it's been allocated to the town the same way as federal match money against federal match. So it'd be good to hear from CCM, and
Okay.
somebody who's looking to see whether, you know, what is going on. I understand, and we can't fight, you know, City Hall relative to this, but there could be other projects coming down the line that we have set aside ARPA money to match. You know, some of the things we're just about to talk about. And it will be great to know if we can't use the ARPA money for match, that's a very important piece.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. And thank you all for your resilience.
Thank you, and I apologize for the special meetings and and thank you for your time and effort on this.
Okay, so we are at consideration possible action request to redirect funds from miscellaneous income to celebrate Old Saybrook.
Really quick. We have a residential blight ordinance on the books. And over the years, I've never enforced it to the point of legal action, but we had a property that we did. It was a vacant piece of property at Oyster Point East or West, I can't remember. And the property ended up selling, and sure enough, we are in receipt of $20,000 in blight funds, which I never thought I'd see anything like that. So we have this miscellaneous income. Clearly, we don't need it to balance this year's budget. So I'm suggesting a use for it, which, you know, goes to a fund that we're gonna need over the years if we continue to have this street events, Main Street events, both in the summer and in the winter, so.
And so do you need an action from this body tonight?
Yes.
And the action would be to approve a certain amount to.
It's 20 grand. Hold on a second.
To approve the transfer of funds
Yeah.
of the amount of 20,000 received
Oh, right.
for life penalty to be placed in the Celebrate Old Saybrook Fund 2915.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So moved.
I didn't see it in the package. Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
There is a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any
Thank you.
opposed?
Thank you.
Unanimous.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we have in front of us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ARPA requests that were voted on at the most recent ARPA committee meeting. There was the 6th request, which was the coastal resiliency, which is now coming back. So I believe it is best to take each one of these and vote on them separately. First one is a request for $500,000 for the purpose of, it's actually, the purpose is setting up housing trust, housing task force, but it's mostly to have the money available for use by the task force, rather than paying for the task force itself. There was we all got the applications, we got in the mail also the summary and background. Is there any discussion any additional discussion we need to have tonight?
Who's the task force?
To be determined, has yet to be set up.
Who's
It's
gonna do that?
Wait, I'm sorry.
the first selectman.
Yes. So pursuant to a law that was passed in 2020 or 2021, we had to have an affordable housing plan, which we did get in 2021. Every town in the state of Connecticut was required to develop an affordable housing plan. In that affordable housing plan, one of the action items is that the town shall form a housing task force to move forward with some other action items to follow. The housing task force in the affordable housing plan is actually quite limited, mostly the town staff. We're batting around like building official, fire marshal, land use official, first selectman, and other department heads. And so we're batting around some ideas as to why would I have the fire marshal, and no offense to the fire marshal, but why am I having the fire marshal on a housing task force? Unless we need his expertise, obviously, on something. But we would talk about housing at our department head meetings, but the idea is to form an additional housing task force. And this funding would be to assist the town in developing diverse housing. Megan said it a few weeks ago, she's not here, but Megan right there. Alternative housing was something she said. So it can be alternative, it could be attainable, it can be affordable, 830G affordable. It can be diverse of housing, a diverse stock of housing. It might be just having smaller, a developer comes in, wants to develop smaller apartments. That's a diversity in housing. And it is actually affordable, even though it's not 830G. So the idea is, and that is very clear in the document that we created in 2021. We have an opportunity here to, I think, Old Saybrook has been very good about embracing the issue of housing diversity. We already have it. Right at the end of North Main Street. That is very different than anything else we have in our town. And that was not easy to get through, and they're one of our top 5 taxpayers. I see this as both good for the population here, whether it's older folks who want to move into something smaller, or younger people who want to start somewhere maybe a little bit less expensive. And not only that, it can be good to grow the tax base. So I think there's multiple things that are good about this. So anyway, that's.
Other questions? Paul?
Yeah, the package that we got on this one, I noticed that it interchanged affordable housing and low-income housing a few times.
Okay.
Is that,
Right, well, the state definition of affordable housing is, 80%, 80% of median income.
right,
Family of three at 80% of median income is $90,150. So it would be for, question really is, and this is why you need a task force, is to be able to determine what do you want to target in the way of workforce housing, income across the board. And so this would really be funds once those decisions get made.
okay. We're putting $500,000 in the pot. Okay, how would we go about appropriating it?
So it would come back here, and I don't know is the answer.
You spoke about the housing task force being town employees or staff.
Yeah, that's,
Would you consider putting 2 or 3 civilians, just registered voters, kind of like a commission?
so the answer is yes,
Okay.
okay? So, yes,
Is somebody on board finance?
yes.
Okay, other questions? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Okay.
Oh, did you make the motion already?
Yeah, I
didn't
thought
even-
somebody did.
I didn't even hear anyone make the motion.
We will.
I know it's on the page, but I didn't hear anybody make the motion.
We will move on to the second one, which is $250,000 Mariners Way Catalyst Program. And to keep us honest, I will read the motion to appropriate $250,000 from the town's ARPA funds for the purpose of setting aside monies to assist with the revitalization of Mariners Way, further to move this appropriation to town meeting.
How can we skip that?
The C room.
Seawall.
Why is my package?
I don't know, here. Did you
It's
skip
in
the
there
seawall?
somewhere.
Yeah, that's seawall,
Put
seawall.
this together with 2 meetings at the same time.
It's just out of order.
Yeah.
Here we are. Let's try this again. To appropriate $100,000 from the town's ARPA funds for the purpose of repairing the old Saybrook Point seawall, further to move this appropriation to town meeting. Carl, do you want to speak to this for?
Is there a motion and a second, or?
I just moved it
Second.
and Brad
Second.
second.
So, sure. The seawall that goes basically from mini golf towards all the way out to Gardner's Landing. So that is in front of Dock and Dine, and then it's in front of Gardner's Landing. Needs work. It needs more than $100,000. Okay? I will tell you that at some point. Maybe not a lot more than that. But it could be up to twice that amount. It could be up to 200,000, I would say, but I don't have an estimate on it. The reason why we want to do this is, number one, the work needs to be done, obviously, and we own land that abuts the seawall, obviously. In addition to that, we're applying for a trails grant. So Jennifer Donahue in Economic Development is applying for a trails grant. We applied for this trails grant last year and we didn't get it. When you don't get these grants, you can go back to the people who award these grants and say, how did we do? How did we score? Why didn't we get it? And she got some feedback. And one of the reasons was you put some soft costs in there, engineering costs, and we'd rather pay for construction costs. And the other one was the seawall seems like it's your deal, and we don't want to pay for repair of the seawall. This is a trails grant. The trail that we're proposing goes from, the sidewalk in front of mini golf and the Duffy Pavilion. It would continue north across the Dock and Dine property. We have in writing secured an easement, a permanent easement across the Dock and Dine property. So we went to the owner of that property and said, if we repair the seawall where your restaurant potentially is going to fall into, will you give us an easement so people can walk in front of your restaurant?
That choice of words. Your restaurant's gonna fall into it.
So we would get a permanent easement across his property. That sidewalk would then continue, we'd make sidewalk improvements and continue into Gardner's Landing. And the idea is to have a little lookout point at Gardner's Landing. And then it continues around Gardner's Landing towards Fort Saybrook Monument Park. So that side of the parking lot, the path would continue until it connects towards the railroad trestles over there. It's an amazing opportunity, and I'll tell you why, because it gives us one of the most beautiful parts of town. Truly, I bet there's nothing like it in the state. You'll be able to walk along the river, essentially from Gardner's Landing, through Mini Golf, through Saybrook Point Inn, where when they built that property, the town secured an easement. That's a public walkway that goes through Saybrook Point Inn in the rear of the restaurant, and then across the causeway.
Oh, wow.
So that is the pitch to the state, and I think it's about a $500,000 grant that we hope to get. And by removing some of the costs that they said we'd rather not fund and funding them ourselves, we thought it was a good opportunity to reapply. And
it's something we really need to do anyway.
yeah, and it is something we need to do anyway. In fact, Ray has talked about this in the past.
Yeah, Gardner's Landing, we have every storm, we have big holes that form underneath the sidewalk and we have to refill them in every storm. Because it's just. Water, yeah.
So the seawall needs to be repaired. And by the way, a lot of it can be repaired on the landward side, digging down and taking care of it from there. We may want to put in some revetments in certain areas, but.
What about the dock? That's the remnants of the dock that's still there because that was owned by, we're getting an easement for the walkway, but what about the dock?
We're not getting an easement for any of the docks.
Well, I know that, but what about when you do the construction? You're gonna have to get rid of it, right? No?
No.
Not to fix the seawall?
I don't think we're gonna have to fix the.
Oh, it came right up to the seawall.
The seawall is actually underneath the dock.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good.
Just to go back to the
Go
same
ahead.
picayune thing, do we have a line item for this, or where's the money going to go? Do we have to create one?
Leanne would create one off budget.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it would be appropriated the same,
Well, once you appropriate it, but we need to get a better number on how much it's gonna cost. So ARPA funding is gonna help with the infrastructure, part of the infrastructure cost. When we get a final cost, I will come back and ask for the additional monies.
Through ARPA funds?
Nope, probably through other town funds.
Do we have any ARPA money left after all of this?
I don't know what it's gonna cost. I don't know what it's gonna cost. Let's wait till we get a cost.
25 more because they threw that.
Yeah, that's true.
So we'll come back. Brad, we don't have a cost. We know it's north of 100.
I just think it's a good place to spend money.
Yeah, it is. It's a very good place to spend money. I agree.
Okay. Moved and seconded, discussed, any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Oh, I need to repeat myself. To appropriate $250,000 from the town's ARPA funds for the purpose of setting aside monies to assist in the revitalization of Mariners Way. Further move this appropriation to town meeting. Having been involved in the Mariners Way, study. Oh, is there a second?
Second.
All seconded.
Thank you.
Having been involved in this process, I can tell you that we are coming right down to the end of it. In fact, tomorrow night, there's a meeting, multiple boards and commissions, as well as property owners and business owners from the Mariners Way District are all going to hear from the consultant on kind of the final set of strategies and initiatives that they're recommending. What the discussion that we had within the ARPA committee is that In the past, various Mariners Way studies have come and gone. Not much has happened, and what we really want to do is we really want to identify kind of what is a catalyst project, what can show that this is different, we're moving forward, not only showing the people of Saybrook that this is different, but frankly, showing the development committee, this is different, that, you know, the things are going to happen out there. So, hearing Paul's previous questions, I can answer some of the questions before you even ask them. There is not a project in place right now. So this, if approved, would go into a fund. It would be allocated out of that fund in the same way in which we have allocated our monies in the past, that they would come back to us for a specific appropriation out of the fund. But this is really to have the money set in place to be able to identify and take on an important project to get the Mariners Way effort moving.
So this is our third attempt at a Mariners Way committee. It's post-COVID, we decided to take another shot at it. This is something that when I took office in 2011, was one of the first things we did. We started a volunteer committee to say, what would we like to see out there? Because that area out there has been underperforming, in my opinion, and I think in many people's opinion, for a very long time. It is a gateway to our community, whether we like it or not, it is. We are spending $90,000 with a consultant, and they're coming to a conclusion with their report, as Bruce said. We are talking about several different ideas as to how we can move something forward out there. One of them is a redevelopment agency. Haddam just did it, East Haddam, in the center by the Goodspeed. It is something a smaller town can do. A lot of larger towns do it. I'm sure New Britain did it at some point, some sort of redevelopment agency. There's vacant properties, there's underperforming properties, there's properties that can be cobbled together. There's a couple of ideas that are out there that we're talking about. If we want to be serious about it, I think there needs to be funding for it. And I think the funding, and I may be speaking a little bit too soon because we're not there yet, but we were talking about a redevelopment agency potentially coming in. My guess is that the redevelopment agency is the entity, the vehicle that might come back and say, hey, you know, we think this is a good use of funds from the ARPA funds that were appropriated. It may not be that, but that is one of the ideas. We're just trying to spark something out there. And if we can get a few properties to move, I'm not sure what else will happen. Maybe a lot of good things could happen. So,
Questions?
One question I have
Yeah.
is, when we're allocating these funds, the 500,000, the 350, do we have a safety net in place that if nothing happens, that this money still gets used before the deadline with ARPA? And then we're out of luck?
So I think it's a good question. And I think so, for instance, let's say affordable housing, we're not able to find something, or we're able to find something, but not $500,000 worth of something.
Sure.
And it's April of 2026. We don't want to forfeit 250,000, 500,000. I wonder, and look, the Treasury wants this money spent. The Treasury doesn't want this money back. They've amended the final rule multiple times. I could look into whether in 2026, could the funds be redirected, even though they were allocated already.
That's gonna happen all over the country.
It is, I agree with you. Because people are in a rush to allocate. We're not in a rush, by the way. This committee, the ARPA committee, Brad, we were on it, has worked very diligently, a lot of meetings. So I could look into that. That's another question I could probably ask CCM. Is there a Treasury rule that's come out that I missed? that says, hey, if you haven't, but I would imagine that will come out after two thousand
So
twenty-four.
shouldn't this stuff be revisited like December of 25 to make sure?
Yeah, probably.
So then we have a full 12 months to reallocate it to a different.
Well, I'd say there's two things. One is we should probably take a hard look in October of 24, based on the kinds of things that you may be finding about, potential reallocation. And then absolutely, if reallocation is possible, wait until then, December of 25, and make sure we've got a year for making things happen. So you're just looking for full-time ARPA committee work, that's all.
No, I don't want this to get lost and then get 500,000 expired and 350.
And it gets
expired.
rescinded.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I
Those
hear
are
it.
very good points.
We should give it all the Parks and Rec, then they'll spend it right away.
Thanks.
We have lots of things you can suggest.
I know you do.
Before we get there, let's vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Speaking of Parks and Rec, to appropriate $150,000 from the town's ARPA funds for the purpose of adding funds to the Park and Rec Capital Fund, P053. Further, move this appropriation to town meeting. Is there a second? Second by Eric. A little background from the ARPA perspective. We're looking at the fact that we had about $1.2 million that was unallocated in February. We have had a couple of different meetings, and the results is what you see. But going back a couple of steps, after we did the initial tranche of funding requests through the ARPA committee then stood back and said, okay, we've handled all of the immediate needs. Let's talk about what are some of the future needs that we want to handle. And one of the key areas of focus was what I'll refer to euphemistically as outdoor recreation, wanting to get people outside, remember COVID related, people outside playing and doing things. So Susan sits on the committee, Susan Esty sits on the committee. The committee asked Susan to go back and work with the Parks and Rec Department, the Parks and Rec Commission, at around $150,000 to come with a set of projects which could be funded. To their credit, they did so, and there are 4 projects that got recommended as part of this. One is the re-siding of Maple Avenue Playfield at $36,000. Second one is putting outdoor fencing at the Kavanaugh Park baseball field, so that one could actually hit a home run over the wall, $9,795. Upgrades to the bathroom at Kavanaugh Park and Clark Community Park, $14,321. And finally, strategic plan improvements at the Clark Community Park, which $89,884. That number is really what was rounding out to the full $150,000 ask. So those are the projects which were proposed. Susan and Ray are here. I assume those are still the projects on the table for the $150,000. And so it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion people have?
The only question I have for Ray is, I had mentioned to you before about, you were talking about having that awning replaced. I really feel strongly that you could do something more permanent, less expensive. And I would hope that you would look into that, just because those awnings don't last very long, especially the winds, etc. And
So as of right now, we have the surplus money that is being used for, I'm sorry, not surplus, capital money that was set forth for the awning. There's certainly some other factors in play, and I have not pulled the trigger on putting that awning up there yet, so.
now you're using, tell me the builder's name, I forget it.
Niantic awning,
What's it again?
Niantic awning,
No, the one that was doing other construction, windows and stuff.
that for the windows for Minnetonka?
Yeah, who's the guy in town?
Doug Eldridge is doing
Yeah,
the windows.
Doug, yeah. So ask Doug Eldridge about it. I'm sure he could build some kind of a covering that would be more permanent, that wouldn't rot out every 8 years. Doesn't have to be taken down, doesn't have to be put up, that type of thing.
Sure.
And just, tie it into the building. Ask his ideas.
I will.
Okay, other questions, comments? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Good stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ray and Susan. Okay, last, one of the ARPA allocations. Is, to appropriate, $100,000 from the town's ARPA funds for the purpose of adding funds to the Acton Public Library Renovation Fund 2875. Further to move this appropriation to town meeting. As this board has heard a few times, we were successful in receiving a $2 million state grant against what appears to be about a $5 million project. They do have $1.2 million from their fund.
Tucker funds,
Tucker
that's what we call them.
Yep, and they're now in the process of fundraising for the balance. And again, going back to some of the issues that the ARPA committee discussed as wanting to see move forward in Old Saybrook. One of those was the development of co-working space. One of the results of the renovation is going to be co-working space at Acton Library, so we thought this would be a good place to put an investment in order to make sure it happens. And so that's the purpose for this.
Second. Man,
Sure.
they won't be fundraising the remainder. The town is going to have additional funding. They are going to fundraise some of the remainder. But there's going to be town monies going into this. So 2 million from the grant. They have 1.2 million from when the library was built in 1999, 2000. They're hoping to fundraise significantly, but I don't want this board to be under any illusions that they will not be asking for money from this board and town meeting. And by the way, why wouldn't they?
Right.
I mean, all right, it's an incredible facility and it's a great library, so.
Where did they get the grant from?
Well, state library.
Oh, state.
Yeah, they got the maximum,
We didn't match it.
they got the maximum amount.
Okay, are we ready to vote? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you all very much. We are on to the selectmen report. So,
I'll pass my time
Oh,
at
George.
this point.
Yeah, so I just, no, just gonna make just a general comment, and not that the whole art thing is over, so, and I think I want to basically come back to some of the, John's comment earlier on, the surplus and so on, so let me see how I can phrase this. So we just basically went through the budget process, right, and so our budget for this town is 50 million. With portion going to school and so on. And I'm trying to basically wrap my head around what proportion of that, or do people think about this, what proportion of that goes to just what I call maintenance of the town versus what proportion goes to enhancement of the town, right? And so, and I like to think that for a town to be vibrant and succeed, we need to enhance it, not just basically maintain it, right? And so these ARPA funds, we're essentially throwing in, the ARPA fund is adding in about $1 million, a little over $1 million for these projects that, I guess my question would be, if the ARPA fund was not available, will we still be doing this, right? And I'm hoping that the answer will be yes, right? And if that's the case, then it feels like when the ARPA fund do end, that we should be, the town should be thinking about adding in 1, 2, 5, whatever the number is, to a fund that will enhance this town by what means we're talking about, right? Whether it's the seawall, library, whatever, and so on. And so and that comes back a little bit into John's question, right? So even though we may have $2 million of surplus this year, you know, in the future, we even had those kind of things. It really, how do we basically think about funding town enhancement projects as opposed to just town maintenance projects?
So, I mean, I would suggest that we do it every year. We enhance the town. And I'd have to go, I could go back last year when we spent a lot of the surplus funds, whether it's on, you know, sidewalks have been an incredible enhancement. I don't want to bore the board with talking about sidewalks, but we've made, enhancements all over town, to the library previously, to Park and Rec, even though we can always do more. So we do a lot of maintenance and we do a lot of enhancement, and, but I'm happy to hear any ideas you might have.
No, and I appreciate that, but it's, and I think it speaks volumes to, prudent management, and I appreciate that, but it's just, the big projects, right? It's something that's gonna cost $10 million or something huge,
We
right?
bond for it. You'd have to bond for
Like the
it.
police stations, they're
Yeah.
gonna
Yeah,
the preserve.
What?
The
The
preserve.
preserve, that's right,
yeah.
that's right, we bonded for that.
But in terms of also, we can start thinking about things down the road and basically start planning for that, right? And I can't imagine, I mean, I don't have those kind of visions, right? But it's just basically, what does Old Saybrook look like 2030, right? That kind of stuff, right? What is it that we want to, so 6 years down the road.
The particularly, it's gonna be underwater at 2050.
Okay, fine. Then we go, then it comes years over, right? But it's just, right, so I mean, what is it that we're looking for
Yeah,
10 years from now, right? And how do we, the visions for that, how do we start
so,
funding for those?
you know, I mean, every town can dream, right? There are, you know, I think we have to keep affordability in mind also, but, yeah, no, that's.
Yeah. And I'm just hoping that when ARPA runs out, that we don't stop dreaming, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think also we're very fortunate that not only can we dream, but we can in some way almost afford to buy the dream, right? So.
Yeah,
pay for the dream,
yeah.
Right, it's, yeah.
And then,
But we have to realize part of the dream is affordable housing, and you can't tax everybody to death and still have affordable housing. So developers and people that are gonna wanna come in here and build this affordable housing are gonna have to see that the tax rate is stable, and our dreams aren't too big for our pockets.
that's part of the process.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, you are not going to report tonight, sir?
No.
We will move on to liaison reports.
Yeah, thank you.
Any liaison? None. Any comments from board members? No. We will move on then to public comment.
I'm the only person here, so I'm gonna thank you all for your due diligence and consideration of all of these needed things that we have just voted on to move forward. As a taxpayer, longtime resident, and previous 50-year-old retail business owner on Main Street, and now my title on the various commissions. These are really needed, and we really had hard discussions on the ARPA boards and at the different commissions, and I thank you all. Thank you, is all I can tell you.
Thank you for all the work you do, Susan. I really appreciate it. Does not appear to be anyone online who wishes to speak. Comments from the chair. My only comment goes back to earlier point when George was talking about the pension board. What I would ask this board to come to our next meeting with any ideas now that hopefully the budget gets approved through town meeting in mid-May. We will have a couple of free calendars, and if there are areas of discussion that we would like to have, pension board has been mentioned, there's been a few other things. Let's collect some ideas, then we can begin to calendar them, and we can have some good discussions moving forward. With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? All in favor?